That is the case for the prosecution, my lord.
Oh.
Sellers, the last witness has alleged that your mother attacked her with an iron. Is that what happened?
Well, my mother was provoked.
Well, will you tell us when you arrived on the scene?
About an hour later, I suppose. Mum was crying. It took some time to calm her down, and then she said I burned her. I burned her with the iron. She could have me arrested. Then she told me what had happened and showed me the dress. Great smears of strawberry jam across it. I just couldn't believe it.
Did you see Caroline Wallace after that?
No, she rang a few times, but I didn't want to know anymore. I mean, I'd been fascinated by her, but she was too neurotic. I just couldn't cope with it.
Now, the day when Miss Wallace went to see your mother, had you asked her to do that?
No, I'd no idea she was going to turn up. Neither had my mother. We'd broken off, you see.
Oh, could you describe that? I mean, how you broke off?
Well, I realised I was just out of my depth, socially, financially. I mean, how was a girl like that going to come and live with me and my mother? Anyway, I told her that as far as I knew it was finished until she turned up at the shop that day.
In other words, you broke off with Miss Wallace?
That's right.
How did she react?
Well, she was none too pleased. She said I was silly to worry about money and that she had enough for both of us and she'd buy us a house. And she said that as a wedding present she'd give me £5,000 of my own and I could do what I liked with it. So it wouldn't be like I was coming to her for money. I said I just couldn't do that, and I don't know, she seemed to think it was all to do with my mother. Anyway, as far as I knew, that was the end of it until she turned up at the shop.
Now, Mr. Sellers, when your wife left you, and then you got together for the picnic, whose idea was that?
Oh, that was entirely different. That was my mother's idea. She knew she'd been difficult and she wanted to make it up.
Was she sorry?
Well, she was worried that I might go off and leave her on her own. I mean, I'd put up with a lot from her because, well, people put up with things from their mothers. Anyway, I did, but for Valerie, that was too much. I mean, I loved Valerie, and my mother forced her out. And she knew she'd better help get her back.
Now, Mr. Sellers, can you describe for us what happened just before you went into the boat?
Yes, I must get it right. At about 2, the sky clouded over, and Valerie said, "Thank you for a lovely picnic, but I think I should be going." Well, of course, that upset my mother, because she told me she'd get Valerie to come back to the flat with us. She said so she tried to get her to stay. She said she'd got this boat booked, and Valerie said, well, it's not really boating weather, but as long as the boat was booked, she'd chance it.
And did she say, "You know I don't like the water"?
I didn't hear her say that.
Had you known previously that she had a phobia about water?
No.
Or did your mother know?
Well, if she did, I don't know how she found out.
So, would you say then, Mr. Sellers, that your wife went quite happily, no, I'll amend that, quite willingly into the boat?
Well, we certainly didn't drag her. She never said she was afraid.
Now, how long would you say you were in the boat before the difficulty arose?
I'd say 10 minutes.
What happened during that time?
Well, it was fun. Everybody was singing.
And what was the first sign of any difficulty?
Well, Nigel started being silly, standing up and rocking the boat in rhythm with the song. Then there was thunder and lightning, pouring rain. It all seemed terribly sudden. I turned around and saw Valerie trying to get out of the boat and my mother trying to restrain her. And Valerie was saying, "Let me go," and Nigel still seemed to be rocking the boat as if he hadn't caught up with what was happening. Then I saw this man in the water trying to help her, and she was completely panicky, struggling and trying to get him under. I was afraid I might hit them with an oar, so I took about 3 strokes out, then turned the boat round and headed in again.
So, when Mr. Warren testified that you seemed to be rowing away from the victim, you were in fact trying to avoid hitting her?
That's right. Then we gave her artificial respiration and the ambulance came. When I got to the hospital, they wouldn't let me see her. The doctor had left instructions that nobody but her sister could see her. A couple of nights later, the police came round and charged my mother. I just couldn't believe it. I don't know what Val told the police, but I think her sister must have gotten to her.
And what was your mother's reaction to all this?
Well, what's anybody's reaction when they're accused of a crime they didn't do? She's frightened. She's very frightened.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers.
Mr. Sellers, you've testified that Caroline Wallace offered you the sum of £5,000. She says that your mother demanded it from her as a wedding gift.
Well, Caroline offered me the money when I told her I wanted to break off with her.
She says it was she who broke off the engagement.
Well, that isn't the way I remember it.
It was, of course, some time ago.
Well, not that long.
Have you had quite a few female friends, Mr. Sellers?
Well, how many is quite a few?
Did you ever have a girlfriend who had less money than you?
My lord, this is a most irrelevant and improper question.
Yes, I quite agree. And, Miss Flannery, I think you know it too.
As your lordship pleases, I withdraw the question. About the dress, Mr. Sellers. You say you actually saw it smeared with jam?
Yes, that's right. I remember it well.
You've also said that about an hour elapsed between the time that Miss Wallace ran from the shop and you arrived to find your mother in tears. Did it occur to you that your mother might have smeared the dress with jam herself?
No, it didn't occur to me.
Is it possible?
I don't think so.
I know you don't think so. Is it physically possible?
Oh, yes, I suppose so.
Thank you. Mr. Sellers, your wife has told us that your mother brought other girls round to meet you when your wife was living there. Is this true?
There was nothing in it.
But did it happen?
Once.
Your wife has also told the court that when she came in she was treated like a servant, and that you went along with that. Is that what happened?
My lord, the prosecution is repeatedly attacking this witness who is not on trial and is not charged with any crime.
The elements of the allegation are based on the relationship between Mr. Sellers, his mother, and his wife. I feel the incident is relevant.
In this particular case, I'm inclined to hear any evidence that may help enlighten us. Please continue, Miss Flannery.
Thank you, my lord. Do you remember the question, Mr. Sellers?
Yes, I did behave the way she said I did. I felt angry at her.
At your wife?
Yes, it was irritating. She loved the whole Cinderella thing. She thrived on it. And she never wanted to get to the ball. I wanted her to show some spirit, talk back, yell, scream, do something.
You admit that your mother mistreated Valerie.
Well, of course she did. My mother was impossible. She tried to wreck every relationship I ever had. She is possessive and she is eccentric, but all that's a very long way from attempted murder.
Now, your sister-in-law has told the court that Mrs. Sellers turned up at our house with a black eye.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us how it happened?
Well, I'm afraid I did it.
Your wife has said that your mother did it.
My mother? No. It was an accident, but I did it. It was the same afternoon as the tea party. Val and my mother finally had a two-way fight. She was supposed to be helping with some alterations, and when my mother asked to see them, she went spare. Started pulling them out of the cupboard and throwing them around. There was a coat on a large hanger, and I was trying to get it away from her, and the hanger hit her on the cheek. Of course, I was sorry, but she rang her sister and left. This whole story is probably Val's way of getting back at us.
You think she lied to the police?
I don't know. Maybe she thought it happened. She's very panicky and not very stable to begin with.
Mr. Sellers, your life seems plagued by wealthy and unstable women.
Well, that may be true. But it does not follow that my mother tried to drown my wife.